Hello and welcome everyone, Ten here, and today I have something really special to share with you. As a member of Maxroll, I was granted exclusive press access to the last Epoch 1.0 build ahead of a February 21st release date, and so I'm here to share all of my thoughts and everything that I'm excited for, including the Falconer, the Warlock, Circle of Fortune. I know, I usually love trade, but Circle of Fortune is just way too overpowered right now, and so much more. Without further ado, let's get into everything that's great and coming out in Last Epoch 1.0. And remember, to keep up with all the Last Epoch content, be sure to get subscribed, then leave a like while you're down there. So the first thing I did is immediately set to work leveling a Falconer. I've been waiting so long for this class, and I'm super excited to try it. Have to say, it was even better than I expected. While leveling, I decided to focus on Falconry and Ballista. I figured if I was using Dexterity to scale a minion, I might as well grab the other minion that scales off of Dexterity. So I'd have big Ballista booms and a Falcon that kills pretty much everything else. And during the campaign, this worked really well. I also found some very cool Easter eggs, such as an entirely new cutscene when you start a character.
In the beginning, there was darkness. Only terror, myself, and the void. I was content with nothing. She dreamt of light, of life, of humanity.
Personally, I really like it when games are immersive, and I love the way that they're adding that immersion to what would otherwise be a very mundane experience. I mean, you select a character and you hit start, and then you're off to kill monsters without too much knowledge about what the world is or what you're in for. I also noticed the new monsters and lighting effects. The world may be lost to the void, but it's never looked so good. As I continued to level, then progressed into the endgame, I found out that Dive Bomb is absolutely absurd. You can kind of think of this skill as automatically double dipping since it inherits all the global damage multipliers from Falconry. So load up on those and get ready to drop some bird bombs. Combining that with Explosive Ballista and Blast Rain makes for an absolutely awesome playstyle. So let's take a minute to talk about some of the choices that I made. Here I have my Falconry tree, where I have Falconer's Journey, 4 Falconer damage per dexterity, global modifier. Then I have, is it a bird? Falconer damage, global modifier. Global modifier. I also then apply all of my own damage modifiers to my Falcon. But all that gets applied here. You want to get as low a cooldown as possible on your Dive Bomb. Then go into a little bit of extra damage here for even more scaling, because why not? Then I also came down here, longer cooldown, much higher damage, a little bit of extra stun. Unfortunately, these nodes are going to be disabled at launch, so I am not taking them, but ideally you would want to take them, because that means your Dive Bomb hits even harder and the cooldown isn't actually too bad. Because you get Avian Arsenal. So every time your Falcon hits something, you get a Falconer's Mark. When you consume that, you get a damage buff. And the buff stacks up to 10 times, which is 300% of your damage gets applied to your Falcon. How do I stack that up? I consume the mark with Blast Rain. This way, when I throw out some explosive traps at the dummy, you see all those nice numbers, then I run out of mana, and then I drop a big old bird bomb. You'll also want as much mana regen as you can get to stack up Sky Signal by throwing explosive traps. As a note, on release this is going to be 3% for a single talent, so you'll get to put an extra point probably into Gelcor's blueprint. And also, Free Lofting Bird helps to recover the cooldown of your Falconer skills. In the release version, this is going to be 3% down from 4. Don't worry though, the build is still incredibly strong. The goal here is to sustain your mana as best you can by lowering the cost of your explosive trap, and getting your explosive trap to occasionally summon Ballista with Siege Engineering. The Ballista then explodes using Armed Construction. This does a massive amount of damage, because it gives 8% more damage per dexterity. When it comes to gear, mine is pretty scuffed, but what you should do is look for dexterity, try to get levels to Dive Bomb, then fill out your resistances and otherwise get defenses. Crit chance is good. Also, melee and throwing damage for your Falcon is good, and there are some new base types which give just that. So be sure to put these on your loot filter. As you can see right now, my resistances are mostly capped. They really should be fully capped, and I shouldn't be super overcapped on things like poison. Should have a Void and Fire up. I'd probably need to double check my crit avoid and other defenses, as I'm definitely lacking in that area, especially for pushing deeper into empowered monos. But also I have 86 dex, which pretty much when combined with the crit that I have, almost entirely scales my damage. So I'd be looking for more defensive stats and more life, but I don't necessarily need more damage, at least at this point. If you're paying close attention when I was talking about my Falconer build, you might have noticed the Falconry Helm. This is one of the new bases coming in 1.0, and they offer some absolutely awesome options for character building. For example, you can have Celestial Rings, which give you ward decay threshold, or Falconry Armor, that gives you dexterity and melee throwing damage for your falcon, the perfect thing to scale falconry to an even more ridiculous level. Some of these bases enable new archetypes, others make existing builds stronger, and all of them are incredibly good. I'm going to go over a few more in just a second, but I did want to quickly shout out one that I don't have, which is a dual res belt, and yes, dual res belts are totally insane. Or maybe you want to avoid cooldowns. With ascetic gloves, you can do exactly that, as they have a cooldown recovery speed implicit. This is quite powerful, as CDR is a very rare and valuable stat. It goes all the way up to 12%. Alternatively, if you like being tanky, consider an Ephemeris Shield, which has mediocre block chance but very high block effectiveness. Alternatively, you could use something like Vanguard Boots that have increased effective haste on you so that you can go even faster. You might have also noticed that in addition to new base types, there are new affixes. Things like armor reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes. Another fun one, if I come into my crafting materials here and find the shard that I definitely should have saved the item for earlier. Here we go. Physical penetration and minion phys penetration, which is now a weapon suffix. Or minion spell and melee damage, which is also a weapon suffix. This should make crafting weapons for a wider variety of builds far easier than it was in the past. I also spent some time trying last Epoch's other new mastery, the Warlock. During the campaign, it played very similarly to a Death Seal Necro.Lich that I had played at the start of 0.9. And as I got into the endgame, I built more and more into Torment, Curses, and Chthonic Fissure. I found that Torment or Necro.Warlock had a very relaxed playstyle. You'd throw out a Chthonic Fissure, which then fired spirits at all nearby enemies, toss up a couple more dots, press your Wandering Spirits every once in a while, and then just chill in Profane Veil where enemies literally can't hit you. Yes, you can take some damage from damage over time effects, but your armor mitigates those as well due to the effects of Profane Veil. So overall, it was a really chill playstyle, but I felt like I barely scratched the surface here, so I'm not going to talk about the build too much. In the future though, I would very much like to revisit this or possibly a Chaos Bolts build, as I didn't have time to try that and it looks awesome. Who doesn't want to trigger Chaos Bolt over Chaos Bolt to add a few more Chaos Bolts? The other major feature coming to last Epoch with 1.0 is the Merchant's Guild and Circle of Fortune, or item factions. Trade is coming to last Epoch, and a dedicated, not quite SSF item acquisition mode. Now, I'm not really going to get into Merchant's Guild here, because I don't think it can fairly be judged based on the press preview environment. There's far fewer players and no real incentive to trade. But I am very excited to share Circle of Fortune because the devs did a genuinely good job of designing a system that's not only cool, but fun to interact with. Once you reach the city of Majelka in the Divine Era, you'll be able to choose your item faction. The two options are the Merchant's Guild and of course, the Circle of Fortune. So just quickly, I'll show you around the Merchant's Guild area, even though I'm not really going to highlight it here. Welcome to the Grand Bazaar, where you can buy idols, Primalist idols, Sentinel idols, all the idols that you'd want. Because I'm playing a rogue right now, I'd probably want to buy rogue idols, though if I happen to get some mage idols, I could always sell them here. Then, coming over to the next wing, you've got helmets, boots, gloves, pretty much every item slot that you can imagine. And there's also some really handy stashes in case you need to take something out or put something in. We've got quivers where you can get your sanguine hordes. We've got amulets where if you're lucky you'll find an Orion's. Then coming around this way, there's a couple of weapons. Two-handed maces, two-handed axes. You know, it's all the two-handed stuff that no one really wants to put indoors because they might fall over and bonk someone on the head. But now let's go back to the Circle of Fortune, because I can talk a lot more about that. I've spent several hours trying it. So here we have the entrance to the Circle of Fortune's observatory. Right away, you'll be able to speak to Galila, who is the Circle of Fortune faction vendor. She has a variety of bases. Some of these are actually pretty darn good, but most are outclassed once you get to the endgame. In addition, she has regional lenses and greater lenses. These are used to modify the prophecies you're offered to better target items you want. Regional lenses generally tend to be less powerful, and they only apply to one specific region. Greater lenses, on the other hand, are far more powerful because they apply to all regions rather than simply the telescope where they're socketed. As a result, they also tend to have a higher faction requirement. So you can see here a lot of these, rank 2, there's maybe a couple in there that might be quite good, especially if you're looking in a specific region to farm a lot. But for the most part, you're not necessarily going to be using those a ton in comparison to the greater lenses, because you have very powerful things like Refracting Lens of Rhyme, or Refracting Lens of Wealth, that are essentially doubling your effects from the prophecies. So a prophecy can last twice as long and offer double the rewards on completion, in exchange for more cost. But remember, the more cost is also kind of less cost, at least in the sense of now one of your prophecies is giving you 4 times the loot without it being 4 times the cost. So that's the faction vendor. It's a very important part of interacting with the Circle of Fortune, and you should get used to what's offered and try to increase your rank as quickly as possible. Heading up these stairs, you enter the observatory proper. For example, talking to Sandrak, where you can view your prophecies. You're also able to do this through the faction menu, where you can teleport directly to the observatory. This shows your rank rewards. Right now, I'm rank 6. Uniques are twice as likely to have legendary potential. If I gain about 100,000 more favor, or more ranked reputation, which is basically 1-to-1 with favor, except you spend favor and you don't spend ranked reputation, at least that's my understanding so far, I'll have twice the chance to get T7 affixes, some of the best drops in the game. On the other hand, I can also view my prophecies. There's handy icons that let you know kind of what it is. Well, you can tell these are amulets over here. This is a belt. These are chess pieces. Right around the room are 4 telescopes. These telescopes are used to store your lenses. For example, here in Arctis, I have Exalted lenses because I wanted more Exalted stuff. The last lens slot is unlocked at rank 9. The other 2 are ranks 2 and 5 respectively, which should make it very easy to unlock. But here, I have it pointed north, but I could look west. All of a sudden, oh look. This prophecy is Glyphs, Shards, and Idols now. Or I can go down south, take a look at the jewelry, relics, all that. East, take a look at the weapons. You'll notice as I do this, I'm not changing where the telescope itself is pointed. And so let's say I want a new helmet. Well, what do I have here? Exalted helmet, exalted gloves. Oh, exalted helmet. I need to kill a rare enemy in the Lightless Arbor dungeon. That should be relatively easy, so I'll go ahead and pick it up. And it cost a little bit of my favor. Then, oh look, exalted Death of Firelich Cremoris in the Soulfire Bastion Tier 2. Well, that's pretty good. As you can tell, you're encouraged to experience the breadth of the game's content. These prophecies don't just say, go into monoliths and grind a ton. They say go into monoliths and find an exiled mage and kill him, or defeat a boss, or go into the Soulfire Bastion. This one can be done at any difficulty, but some do have higher difficulty requirements. Alternatively, I could go into the Temporal Sanctum, Tier 4, and do the difficult task of defeating Chronomancer Julra. But hey, if I was going there anyway, it only costs 1,000, so it's pretty cheap. On the other hand, Tier 3 Soulfire Bastion. You'll generally want to experience a lot of different content within Last Epoch, and this encourages you to do so by stacking the rewards. So you can kind of think of this as you run monoliths for a while, and then you take a whole bunch of really shiny prophecies into your dungeons or your arena run, making it far more rewarding for the cost of a single key. Now for fun, I'm going to load up on a bunch of prophecies for the Temporal Sanctum and see how that goes. Personally, I don't plan to use this to target more rewards in certain types of content like the Temporal Sanctum, but I will be using it to target the types of rewards that I want. Now with those prophecies stacked up, let's head over to the Temporal Sanctum and see how it goes. Right away, the first prophecy procs as I start killing enemies. Then, a little later on, I proc a second one. These were for defeating rare monsters. But remember, the last and most important one comes from defeating the Chronomancer herself. So to the end of the dungeon we go, and with a little bit of editing magic, boom, she's dead right in front of us, as are those 5 helmets, or in this case 6, because she happened to drop a unique helmet as well. In short, if you like big loot explosions, you're going to like stacking up your prophecies and spending all your favor with Circle of Fortune. On the other hand, you'll use the Merchant's Guild to sell the items you drop and don't need, or purchase your next upgrade. And by the way, you won't have any rank requirements to sell things, just to purchase them, but you will still need to pay favor both ways. One huge change coming to Last Epoch with 1.0 is a complete revamp of monoliths and corruption. This is a multi-part change, but there's several things I'm excited about. The first is, and most importantly, all of the modifiers have been normalized. So you'll notice here, enemies deal 12% increased damage, and they have 200% increased critical strike chance. Enemies heal if they haven't been hit recently. You'll probably remember that one. 25% to all res. But look at this, void enemies deal 25% increased damage. High health enemies take 25% less. The numbers used to get absolutely crazy, especially as you push corruption, and especially if you didn't pay attention to all the modifiers that you were stacking on top of each other. That's very bad, because it multiplied with the base health and damage that enemies got from corruption, often making unkillable god monsters, or things that just one-shot you. And sure, if you go far enough into the corruption, it'll still do that, but it's going to be a much more consistent difficulty level. Now, 436 corruption, enemies have 433% more health and damage. At a baseline, you know how deadly that is, and you know roughly how deadly the modifiers are going to make it, because at most, they only last for 3 echoes. You can still fail. That happened here. I just wasn't paying attention at all, and I got myself blown up. Some of the modifiers are still quite dangerous, but at least they're consistent dangerous instead of constantly ramping up, leading to what felt like very random damage spikes or punishments for not reading. And I mean, sure, people should be punished to an extent for not reading, but it was a little excessive here. My experience with the system, pushing a different monolith, then jumping over to this one, defeating a shade quickly to get all that bonus corruption, is that actually it's really, really smooth, and it feels a lot better than the past system. I find that I'm able to easily and consistently build stability now. I don't really have to worry as much about modifiers, and I also find that at much higher corruptions, my build is still very comfortable. I can die at 436, but honestly, in comparison to past Last Epoch, this feels a lot closer to 200 corruption in terms of a level of how careful I have to be with mods. So it feels like a very welcome change, and most players should find their progression much smoother. But why do you want to push corruption? Well, you want to push corruption because it gives you better loot. That means more tier 7 exalted items. It also means more unique items dropping, and therefore more unique items with legendary potential dropping. Higher corruption means better loot, so therefore you should always continue to advance. But at the same time, if you fail the echo, the loot is lost, or at the very least rewards at the end, which make up a majority of your loot. And furthermore, if you fail the bosses and the Orobuses, you lose further progress. So you should stay within the range that's comfortable for your build. To a point where yes, you can probably die if you mess up, but it's not so extreme that it's a hindrance to your progress. Now, a big part of the fun in an ARPG is the loot. So here's a quick look at one of the very fun unique items which I found along my journey. Falcon Fists. I didn't end up making a build of it, I didn't quite have the time to, and also the scaling's a little bit janky. But basically, this allows you to play unarmed Cinder Strike by using the level of your Falcon's falconry to scale the damage. 14 Cinder Strike damage per level, which is going to be at least 280 at level 20, but the higher the level, the better, and it gives +2 to level of falconry, +4 to Cinder Strike. You also gain a bit of AoE, and every time your falcon hits an enemy, you get even more melee damage with Cinder Strike, plus a little bit of extra area. If you like playing Hollow Palm Technique or you're a Facebreaker enjoyer, these gloves might be pretty sweet, and let me know down below if you come up with any build ideas for them. There's a ton to look forward to with Last Epoch 1.0. This 20-minute video barely even scratches the surface. I had a ton of fun with a Falconer, and I didn't even get to make a Bow Mage. Oh, also the Warlock's pretty cool too, even if I haven't made that Chaos Bolts build yet. Also, pushing corruption is much easier than before. It's not quite account-bound progress, but at least we're getting there one step at a time. And the game looks beautiful. It's so much more immersive than it was in the past. It feels like you're actually part of a world. The lighting is wonderful. The text is far more readable. And overall, it just looks and feels way more polished. So if you haven't played Last Epoch for a while, now's the perfect time to return. And if you've never played Last Epoch at all, now's the best time to pick it up using my Nexus, which will be down in the description, while also helping to support the channel. If you're looking for more Last Epoch content, I've already released several beginner-friendly videos, which I'll link down below. Or you can find a full suite of guides, including full build guides on how to level every mastery in the game, endgame builds, and much more, over at Maxwell GG. I'm really excited for the 1.0 launch, and I'm very happy to be part of a Maxwell press event, so I could share some of the 1.0 content with all of you early. For once, I actually have my cycle starter decided, but what about you? What are you going to start? Let me know down below. And also, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for their continuing support. Link to support is down below. Big thanks to everyone who watched till the end. I hope you had as much fun watching this as I had making it. May the servers be stable, and may your drops be lucky.